This episode of Men of Prestige, this is not something that people do intentionally, including not crying. Like if I tend not to cry when there's something that would typically make a woman cry, it's not something I decided I'm not gonna cry. It's just what it is. It's something that's very subconscious. We're pre-programmed and preconditioned that way. Should we encourage more vulnerability? Yes. However, vulnerability is not equivalent to crying. Okay, and there are contexts where no, you should use your higher senses as a man and understand that crying here could be cute, vulnerable. She likes that according to what she said, but it creates a negative effect when it comes to attraction. You should be aware of that because that can happen. Okay. Buster number 5, conscious experience. Okay, it's not a conscious experience. That's the point of that. Okay. It's not something like I'm gonna cry right now. Are women more emotional than men? 9 myth busters. Let's get into it because I don't want to waste any time on this one, right? Are women more emotional than men? Is this a myth? Well, I have 9 myth busters to share with you on this particular thing. But let me go ahead and just read the quote right away. Even though we are conditioned to believe that women are more emotional than men, this belief is untrue. And the science behind it has been falsified for decades now. That doesn't mean you should start crying like a bitch in front of your girl, by the way. Okay? Crying is different from vulnerability. They are two different things. Okay? It's time we stop labeling women as overly emotional and start celebrating their intelligence instead. Emotions are complicated and nuanced topic. That's a fact. Okay? All right, so we talk about women are more emotional, like that's some kind of exact science or something like that. And usually people that are saying this have never read up anything on it, right? So, but here's some 9 busters, myth busters. Buster number 9: types of emotion, crying versus anger. Okay, who tends to express their emotions more in the form of anger? Well, there are studies that show that men are more quicker to go in the direction of anger. Okay, but we say sometimes you see men having conversations online and they're saying that same sentence that men are more emotional, but they're saying that with a level of anger and they're missing the part that anger is a type of emotion, right? Oh, we thought it was just crying that was emotions. No, crying is an expression of emotion. That's not the emotion itself. It's a way humans express a certain type of emotion, right? And it's not something people decide to do. It's something that's triggered, obviously based on many things, inclusive of, something hurt their feelings, right? Sometimes because of how young they are, right? So, the types of emotions, there's crying, there's anger, that already will bust that myth, okay? If you look at a man tends to express more anger than a woman, clearly that will bust that myth, right? Buster number 8: socialization versus biology, nature versus nurture, right? Some things were built from nature, just how God created a male versus a female, right? And some things were based on socialization, the social construct that we live in, right? So the social construct that we live in obviously perpetuates the idea that it's okay for a woman to cry but not for a man to cry. So is it women are more emotional, or is it because we've socialized ourselves into that angle, right? What about biology? Some people claim that there's a gland in the eye that's bigger for crying in women. Maybe not. But bottom line is that it's not 100% biology. Bottom line is that a man can cry. But here's another bottom line, right? Another bottom line is that there are consequences for crying like a bitch when you enter into a fight with your woman. She's trying to tell you something, you try to manipulate her with cry, and she starts to look at you funny, like, what kind of man is this? Remember, it's part of the social construct. She's also pre-programmed, right? To think that way, conditioning to think that way. Not just her in particular, not just you in particular, generations, thousands of years of generations of humans. All right, so all of that already will bust that myth. Are men more emotional than, or women more emotional than women and men? not necessarily at the core of things, but do they tend to express themselves more emotionally? Let's keep going here. Buster number 7, psychological arousal, right? So I already talked about that. It's psychological arousal that makes someone cry. It's not just because somebody decides they want to cry. That's not how that works. Sometimes they cry because other things instigate that, other things influence that, psychological reasons, right? So that's in addition to socialization, that's in addition to biology, if you will, but that's something to consider, right? So it's not necessarily true. It could be true within certain types of context. Women more emotionally expressive, but what kind of expression are we talking about? Anger or crying? These are the conversations we should be having around this. It's not going to be as simple as men are less emotional. No, it's not that simple. Of course not. So like I was saying, Buster number 6, expressive behaviors. How we express our emotions obviously differs from one gender to the other. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay, because nowadays we also see certain men subscribing to what the women's rhetorics of it's okay for a man to be more emotional, don't suppress your emotion. Well, here's the thing, again, it's a psychological arousal. Nobody stopped themselves from crying intentionally. That's not how it works. But they could be pre-programmed or conditioned to not do that naturally. So when we make that a thing, or we make that a reason why there's some toxic relationship, we miss that boat because it's not something that people do intentionally, including not crying. Like if I tend not to cry when there's something that would typically make a woman cry, it's not something I decided I'm not gonna cry. It's just what it is. It's something that's very subconscious. We're pre-programmed and preconditioned that way. Should we encourage more vulnerability? Yes. However, vulnerability is not equivalent to crying. Okay, and there are contexts where no, you should use your higher senses as a man and understand that crying here could be cute, vulnerable. She likes that according to what she said, but it creates a negative effect when it comes to attraction. You should be aware of that because that can happen. Okay. Buster number 5, conscious experience. Okay. It's not a conscious experience. That's the point of that. Okay. It's not something like I'm going to cry right now. Let me cry right now. That's not how that works. Okay. Buster number 4, social and cultural standards. Okay. Depends on where you're coming from, depending on the social ways of people behaving, cultural, it's just, these are some of the factors that we have to consider, right? So if you're considering that and understand that that has nothing to do with the nature of the biology of a man, then you understand that it's not true. Neither is it false. It's somewhere in between, okay? Buster number 3, neuroscience actually has also busted that myth, because when they look at all the different nerves that goes into the facial expression that creates crying or anything like that, that what people consider emotions, the number of nerves is not more for women. It's the same. There's nothing significantly different to make that much of a difference. I talked about the gland earlier, but when it comes to the nerves and the neuroscience of it, there is no real proof that a woman is more emotional than a man. Okay. Buster number 2, masculine versus feminine energy as usual. Obviously that's present in all of us, but even the dominating energy in us, either as a male gender or female energy itself, is a product of the social construct of socialization. Okay, that can change 50 years from now. Be aware, stay aware. That can change over time. It's been changing. Men are more in their feminine. When men are bitching or complaining about women, that's feminine energy. Yeah, I said it. That's feminine energy. It's not right or wrong. It's just what it is, right? So if you engage a woman who is naturally in their feminine with that feminine energy, these two energy will spark off chaos. Just like if a woman is more masculine and she's acting masculine and you're trying to compete in masculinity, that's going to be chaotic. To create sexual polarity, you need the opposite of each other. Okay? So be aware of that's present in all of us. You're not crying because you're more feminine. That's not really relevant. Okay? It's not relevant. Buster number one, negative consequences. So like I said, be aware that if you're crying in front of your girl, that can tamper with attraction level. It's not right or wrong. It's just what it is, right? It depends on what you're crying about. Your mother died and you're crying. I don't think she's concerned about that. I think she's more so happy to be there for you. I don't think she's reducing attraction because of that. I don't think she gets to intentionally reduce attraction. It's either she's attracted or not. Well, you lost your job as opposed to you getting out there and doing putting up some resumes together and actively, aggressively going after it. You're hiding in a corner in the house and you start to cry, and then you claim they said it's okay to be vulnerable. Bro, there's negative consequences for your ignorance. Okay? No. Or your mother died and you bottled in that emotion and you don't grieve properly, right? There's negative consequences for that. And you don't get to blame the woman for that. You don't get to say because men are not emotional. No, don't say that. That's unhealthy. That's not sustainable. That's not gonna last too long before you self-destruct.